Good afternoon, everybody. This is Joyce from BoQ Creations, and I'm going to show you how to make this Hello Pumpkin sign. So when you get it, it has the backboard, it has all of the pieces, and I know that painting seems like a lot of trouble to go through, but what if I told you that you could use your Distress Oxide inks that you might already have in your stash, that you might not need to paint at all to do this? So would that make it a little bit more fun for you to do? I think so. So when you get this, it's going to be packaged in plastic so none of your pieces fall out. So I'm just going to undress it. Sorry for the crinkling. Now, we make these in-house here at BoQ Creations, so I think that's kind of fun that you can get them here. And I'm going to scoot this back just a little bit so that way, there we go. Okay, so that way you guys can see. All right, so it's got 3 pumpkins. It's got the word pumpkin and the word hello. So we're going to treat each one of these as a separate component for the coloring of it. And then you have your board that it's going to be glued on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these pieces away for just a moment because I want to work on the board itself. Because I did have to use a little bit of acrylic paint, but there's no reason why you could not use your Distress Oxides and a brush to go over this if you wanted to. So I decided that I was going to do mine with paint. And so all I did was I grabbed a basic brown acrylic paint. This is from Americana, and it's just basic brown. I'm going to put it in one of my little trays here, just like that. And then I'm going to take a paintbrush, and I am going to mix a little bit of white in there just because I like to have the option of making it a little bit lighter. So I'm going to put a little bit of white paint in my my well there. And then I can take a little bit of my brown. And then this is going to give me a light brown, a white, and a dark brown. So you can see that when I mix this white in there, this paint becomes a little bit lighter. And you'll see why in just a minute. I think you're really going to enjoy this particular part of it, because this is just painting with acrylic paint. There we go. And that's all I'm going to do. I've got a dark brown, I've got some white, and I've got dark brown and white mixed together. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to start painting my board, and I'm not even going to be concerned about the fact that I have white in my. Let me just hang that up right there. I'm not even going to be concerned about the fact that I have white in my brush, because that's going to add to the ambiance of my painting here. And if you'll notice, I'm doing my strokes up and down. I want to paint this up and down like this because that's what's going to give me those neat wood look strokes in my board, because we're wanting to make this look like an old piece of wood. And so that's what we're going to do. Just keep adding the strokes. You can see I'm almost out of the dark paint right now, so I might have to add some more, but I'm just doing strokes up and down like this, just up and down. If you need more, go ahead and get more. I recommend painting it with the brown first and then going back in with your strokes of color, just like this. Okay, so up and down in one direction. Try not to go back and forth, because that's going to give you a very confused look to your painting. So again, we're just going to paint these strokes right in here until everything is covered. And I kind of like that we have all of these different colors mixing in. So I'm going to start adding in some of my lighter brown that I have. Just getting it on my brush, so that way as I'm brushing my strokes, it's already there and kind of giving me that, whoops, that wood look effect. Just like that. Look at that. I love how this is coming out already. All of these different colors in here are making quite the difference for our board. And we're just going to continue painting until we get nice long wood strokes and everything is covered. And I've got some white here that I can actually get some of this light color and then maybe put some white in my little well here to give me something different. And that's perfectly okay, because guess what? This is going to be a wood look board. So we don't want to. And you can crackle this if you wanted to. If you wanted to add some crackle medium onto this, you absolutely could. But don't stress yourself out about the board, because what's going on it is even prettier than the board itself. So you can see that with all of this white that I've kind of mixed into these colors here, you can get a very mixed stroke here to kind of look like wood, you know? And that's the fun part about it. There we go. Now we are all covered all over the board. There we go. I'm just gonna put some white here, just so we don't look like we're all one color. And that's all there is to painting the board, okay? So I'm going to move this to the side so that it can dry while we are working on the rest of the pieces. The important thing is you want to make sure, because I'm looking now and I'm seeing my strokes are kind of going a little bit sideways. You want to make sure that you have your board in the correct orientation where the holes are, because if not, you'll see that your strokes go sideways. And maybe that's okay for you. It's not a bad thing. So there we go. There is my board. I'm going to let that dry over here. And I'm going to flip this over so that I don't have wet paint all over my pieces that I'm trying to do. And then I'm going to start with the hello. Now remember, we always have a different brush for our Distress Oxides. So I have ripe persimmon, spiced marmalade, fossilized amber, red brick, any kind of colors that I want to try. I'm going to see what each one looks like. Crackling Campfire is kind of that orangey. And Fired Brick, I think, is going to be a little bit more red. Yes. So I think I'm going to use the Fired Brick. And I'm just going to take my brush, rub it on the pad, and I'm just going to coat my letters with the Distress Oxide. Look at that, no painting necessary. This is the fun part for me. And it gives you kind of a matte finish on your piece. Look at that. So you can make it whatever color you want. I'm gonna show you a little ombre trick here in just a minute. But you can certainly make this whatever color you want. I've seen people do it with pink. And you can use regular dye-based inks too. You don't necessarily have to use oxide. So if you don't have any Distress Oxides or you don't have the right color, just use an ink and a brush. It's not a big deal. Look at that. Isn't that cool? So the reason that I really like the Distress Oxides is because they will layer on top of one another. And so if I wanted to come in here with that Crackling Campfire that's a little bit orange, all I'd have to do is just rub my brush, pick up some of that orange, and then I'm gonna just brush the top of the hello, and you'll see it kind of becomes a reddish orange look at the top, and then an orange red at the bottom. And I don't know if you can much see that right now while it's still wet, but there is an orange at the top, and it looks kind of cool when it dries because you have kind of an orange shadow at the top and red on the bottom. So that's all you need to do for that one. So I'm going to set that aside. And the two colors I used for that one was Fired Brick and Crackling Campfire. I'm going to clean off my brush over here. There we go. And then I'm going to come in with my letters. Now, I decided with my pumpkin that it's probably better to make sure that you have your letters spelled and are facing the direction that they're supposed to be, because I did the back of one and then, you know, had to redo it. So lay your letters out as if you were going to P-U-M-P-K-I-N. There we go, pumpkin. There's one of them that is specifically an N and one that's specifically a U, so this is the one. Okay. So with that same technique I was going to show you, I have spiced marmalade, ripe persimmon, and fossilized amber. And I'm going to go in that order. Okay. So I'm just rubbing some of the ink color off of my brush because I want to start fresh. Here is my spiced marmalade. Now I can take that spiced marmalade, load up my brush, and then brush the top of each letter. Just like that. And it doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to add several colors and several layers. So there you go. There's K. And then we've got I and N. And remember, we're just brushing the top of it very haphazardly, just enough that that ink will soak into the wood. And then we are done with spiced marmalade. Brush off my brush. Come in here with the ripe persimmon. I hope that's ripe persimmon. This is spiced marmalade. Oopsie. I think I have mixed up my colors. Give me just a second. I thought that looked quite familiar. Okay, ripe persimmon. I messed up my colors. There we go. Let's get the right color in here. How about that? So now I'm just going to take my letters and I'm going to brush that second color right across the middle, and you're kind of seeing like a candy corn effect almost. Let's take one letter at a time, just like that. I think this is kind of cool. Just right across there, and now you've got the letters, and then this gives it kind of a, I don't know, kind of a cool effect. And then I'm going to come in there with my fossilized amber, and again, I'm going to wipe my brush off in between each color. Go, fossilized amber. Make sure my brush is nice and loaded, and then I'm just going to fill in the rest of the spots on my letters. Whatever is not finished. There we go. Doesn't that look like a candy corn? I kind of like that. I mean, after all, it is a fall sign, so look at that. I love those letters. And I'm doing it all with my Distress Oxides, guys, except for the backboard that's being painted. All of it is getting done with my Distress Oxides. So we've got the hello, and we've got the pumpkin over here, just like that. All right, and now we're going to do the pumpkins themselves. My recommendation is lay the pumpkins out like they're supposed to be on the sign, because if not, there's a chance that you could paint the wrong side of the pumpkin. So I lay them out just like that. I'm still going to do one at a time, but I want to make sure that I've got them on the correct side. So for this one, I used the spiced marmalade again. I used the fossilized amber and the ripe persimmon. Now, this one was a little more of a blending technique than anything else. So I'm actually going to start with my fossilized amber first, because this is going to give me a light yellow background on my pumpkins, okay? And you'll see why I'm doing this in just 1 second, okay? So I'm just gonna go completely over the whole pumpkin with the fossilized amber, all 3 of them. And I know you might be saying that pumpkins are orange, but actually pumpkins are all color. They can be all colors. So you could have one that's mostly orange and one that's mostly yellow and mostly green. That would be fine. There we go. All right. So that was the fossilized amber. So now I'm going to come in here with the spiced marmalade, which is a little bit more of an orange, yellow orange than a red orange. And I'm going to just come back to my pumpkins and I'm going to do the same thing, except you see that I'm kind of blending just right along the edges and the bottom. I still want to see some of that yellow. I don't want to get rid of all of that yellow color that we just put on there. So I'm really kind of just following the edges of the pumpkin. So you can see how it's kind of like that. And then still leaving pockets of that yellow to be seen, because that's it's a really nice effect. And there we go. So now you can see those pumpkins coming together. I love it. All right, that was spiced marmalade. And now we're gonna come in here with the really, really red orange, which is the ripe persimmon. And we're gonna be very, very ginger with this. So I'm gonna go back to my smaller brush, because this one could easily overpower the colors that we have on there. And we just kind of wanna blend that in a circle from the edge. And I'm going, if you notice, right along the edges of the pumpkin. Just like that, and you will get a beautiful blended, different colored pumpkin that allows it to look a little bit more natural. And again, I'm just blending just right along these lines that have already been cut out for you. There you go. If you want to make it a little bit darker, you can certainly make one of the pumpkins, like if you want to add, you know, some other red on top of this one, and let's say we want to make this one a little bit darker, you can absolutely do that. It just brings different perspective to the pumpkins. I think that makes it look super nice. And I actually think I'm going to make this one a little bit more red orange, because maybe this one is a smaller pumpkin that really kind of doesn't have much, you know, to offer yet because it's not ripe. There we go. And so that's the ripe persimmon. So I've got kind of yellow, a little bit yellow, and really orange. And that's gonna look great on my background. Okay, so now we're gonna get finished with our oranges, and I'm gonna bring in the walnut stain for my pumpkins, because the walnut stain is what's going to give our stems, it's going to give the stems that brown kind of color that we need for. And don't worry, we're going to add a little bit of green. I just do the brown first, just like that. And you can have it so that the wood look is showing through if you want, or you can come back over it and make it a little bit darker. That is totally up to you. But I find blending it down the pumpkin looks a little bit nicer. Just makes it look a little more realistic, and certainly just the tiniest little bit at the bottom, because, you know, there might be a shadow where it's sitting on the ground. So just the tiniest little bit on the bottom of the pumpkin. So we're effectively painting with the Distress Oxides, I think. Take that walnut stain, and then I'm going to come in here with a little bit of Rustic Wilderness. And I'm just going to take a little bit of that green and kind of flick my brush a little bit to give that stem some brown, but also maybe just a little bit of green, because it might still be a little fallish in color, a little bit, you know, because pumpkins do have some green on them. And I came down here and got a little too much, so I'm just going to go back over that with that brush that I already had some orange in. And there we go. And so far, I've only used Distress Oxides. So how cool is that? And we've done all the pieces. So in 5 minutes, that's, you know, doesn't take very long at all. So I'm going to get rid of this piece of paper because we are now done with all of that. Clean up my mess a little bit here. There we go. All right, now we're going to bring back in our wooden board. And for the most part, this is dry, but I'm going to take my my brush with the Distress Oxide in it, and I'm just going to rub in a little bit of that orange that's left on my brush, because guess what that does? That ties all the colors in and makes them all look nice and communal. So there are my 2 holes. So I want to make sure I have these straight, because if you don't line these up straight, your whole picture is going to be off. Okay? So now, there's my pumpkins. How cute do they look? Look at that. How adorable. Look at that. You want to make sure your pumpkins are not hanging off of your sign, but that they're, you know, they're all working together. You don't want a great big space between them. There you go. How beautiful is that already? And then we have our hello that's standing out nice and bright. Now I am going to show you a little trick that I like to do. I like to take a large dry paintbrush, just a very dry paintbrush. And if it's large, then you can take some of that white paint that you had in your little palette here. And I'm just going to grab a little bit. And I'm just going to tap my brush and just let those dry bristles really pick up some of that white paint. Not a lot, but just enough. And then I can take, and if I want to distress the edges of my hello with a little bit of white, in a minute it will not look so white. It'll kind of just give the oxide a little bit of texture, I think. Just a little bit more interest. And it doesn't stay white on the Distress Oxide. You know what? It's even putting a little bit of splatter onto my board, and I think I kind of like that. But I don't want to do that too much, so I'm actually going to move my board out of the way. Okay. And so then I'm just going to put a little bit of that dry brushing right onto the edge of my things here. And you see, it kind of almost immediately takes a light effect on the pieces there. And it just kind of gives a little bit of texture to that pumpkin, you know, just a little bit. I kind of like how that looks. Look at that. Isn't that neat? And then you can just kind of come in here and pounce some of that texture right there. Remember, your brush is very, very dry. Your brush is very dry. And we like that because then that way it just really gives it kind of a static look. Look at that. Oh my gosh, that's so pretty. On this one, it's going to be a super effect because of all of that bright orange. And then this just gives me a little bit of texture for my pumpkin. And I don't know, I just kind of like the way that looks. There we go. Okay. Now you might think that you have to put this together with wood glue. Nope. You just use your regular BoQ Creations craft glue. That's all I used. And then I just turned over my piece and I just squeezed out some of the regular craft glue. You can use art glitter, you can use Bearly Art, you can use any kind of PVA, any kind of glue that will dry clear, so that way if you accidentally, get somewhere it's not supposed to be, that you're going to be 100% because it's going to dry clear. Okay. And I'm going to make sure that my holes are centered and straight. And then this hello is meant to go just right below those holes. Just like that. Now, if you want to take a rag and like wipe that away, you absolutely can, but it's not necessary. It's going to dry clear. And then I'm going to move down here to put my pumpkins on. I'm going to start with the middle one. And you can see that I'm just squeezing a little bit of glue onto here. It's not a lot, doesn't take much. This is good glue. And I'm going to put my center pumpkin in, making sure that my other ones are aligned, because we don't want any of our pumpkins going off of the board. So that looks like a good place to put this pumpkin. Right there. And then we just rinse and repeat. There we go. And the coolest part about all this is that it was made with Distress Oxide, so you don't have to have a lot of different supplies to do this. If you have a couple of colors of Distress Oxide or Distress ink or any kind of dye-based or hybrid ink that you might have, you could even use your markers, although I would recommend that you not, because it will use up all of your markers. There we go. Isn't that cute? See, I got a little bit on my board, but it's no problem because it's going to dry clear. How are we doing so far? You guys liking that? All right. Now, I did find that with the pumpkin, if you want to make sure that it is centered correctly, start by putting all your letters down first. There is a trick to getting all of these centered. There's my in. Okay. So my trick for this is to glue down your first letter and your last letter first. Okay? So that way everything can be centered right in the middle. All right, just like that. So we're going to take the P and we're going to lay that one down first. And then we're going to come over here to the last one and we're going to just eyeball that we have enough space equal so that it doesn't look lopsided. And then we're going to glue the N down, P-U-M-P-K-I-N. I have to make sure I spell it correctly. Okay, and that gives me about the same amount at the end. And so then I just go back and I start putting in my letters one at a time. Oh, it's starting to rain here. That's what you see here in the background. This way I have some way to line up my letters where they're all the same. And then I have a guide. Okay, same thing. Outside, outside, inside, last. Kind of sounds like a algebraic equation. First, outside, inside, last. What do they call that? Foiling, I think, for my math teachers out there. I think that's called foiling. First, outside, inside, last. Yeah, foil technique. All right, and you can see that I'm doing one. I think my glue here is getting a little bit dry. Let me stick my pen in it. There we go. Okay. There's our P, and now all we have is the K, and it automatically will center itself if you do that, because these two, when you work your way in, instead of just trying to work this way, sometimes you get, oh, too much space over here, and then it's all jumbled together over here, but you don't have to worry about that when you do it this way, because, okay, my tip must be clogged, so let me just nibble a little bit off of there. There we go. I think my glue does not want to work with me today. There we go. Now it's coming out. My bottle is nearly empty. I'm just glad that I don't have to use wood glue on this. I'm just thankful that the glue that I already have in stock is what will work on this. There you go. And that's it. That is all there is to creating this Hello Pumpkin sign. I'm gonna back out a little bit so that you guys can see it in its full glory. So there you go. And so you can do whatever you'd like to do. If you want to go in and highlight that with a white pen, you certainly can do that. I usually make some stitches around the edge, so you can absolutely do that, and I will show you guys how I do that in here in just a second. Let me attach my stand back. There we go. At BoQ Creations, we have this nice white paint pen, and it's an acrylic paint pen, and it has a very large nib on it. And so I'm just wiping the paint that I used on it yesterday off. And then I'm just gonna go into my board and I'm just gonna do some dots just like this. Just some stitching. And I think that looks a little more country. I'm just going all the way around, making it look like it's stitched. How cute is that? And I go in the same direction, that way all of my stitches look like I sewed them in the right direction, in the same direction. It's not hard to do, but it adds so much to the piece. Look at that. Isn't that neat? Just very little effort, but it just makes it look so much more neat. And really brings out that wood look in the back in your background. There we go. And that's all there is to it. If you wanted to put like a little, you know, mark up here at the top just to kind of give a little bit of accent. You certainly could do that. Like, I like to be able to know where my accents are. There we go. Just a little bit more. How cute is that? And you're all done. All you need to do is to put your string and your bow and whatever on it, and you have a nice 11.5 inch, actually it's 11.75 inch board that you can hang on your door. You can put some glitter on it, make it all pretty if you want. And that's all there is to it, guys. This whole project, start to finish, was 36 minutes. So, you know, it's not a very long time, doesn't take very long. I'm gonna put the colors that I used for the Distress Oxides just so that you can take a snapshot if you want. I used Rustic Wilderness, Walnut Stain, Fossilized Amber, Spiced Marmalade. Move these over a little bit. Spiced Marmalade. I used Crackling Campfire. And then I used a little bit of brown acrylic paint, a little bit of white acrylic paint, and that was all there was to this. So the sign is available at BoQ Creations. We do have some other ones, but the same technique applies. You just use your Distress Oxides for your color, and be sure you have your dedicated brushes for those colors. And then I did use our regular BoQ Creations craft glue that's available at boqcreations.com. So if you are interested in creating one of these DIY signs, let us know. We got your sign for you. Thanks, guys. Have a great day. Bye.